when Clint Eastwood walked onto the set of The Truth with Jessica Lange. The audience expected just another Hollywood interview. But Jessica Lange had no idea she was about to make the biggest mistake of her career. She thought she was setting Clint up for an easy takedown, a viral moment where she could paint the legendary actor and director as outdated. What she didn't realize was that Clint wasn't just another guest. He was a man who had spent decades cutting through the noise, unbothered by pressure. And what happened next became a defining moment in television history. Because in true Clint Eastwood style, he didn't just respond, he turned the entire interview into the ultimate lesson on strength, wisdom, and why old-school values will never go out of style. The stage was set. The lights bore down on the polished studio floor, reflecting off the sleek glass table positioned between two chairs. The audience murmured with anticipation, some shifting in their seats, others clutching their phones, fingers hovering over the record button. This was The Truth with Jessica Lange, one of the most watched talk shows in America, a show that thrived on viral moments, heated debates, and a host who knew exactly how to corner her guests. Jessica Lange, a striking blonde in her early 30s, had built her career on sharp wit, cutting questions, and an unapologetic progressive stance. She'd made headlines countless times by humiliating conservative guests, exposing their outdated views in real time. And tonight, she had her biggest target yet, Clint Eastwood. At 94 years old, the legendary actor, director, and symbol of old-school American grit had agreed to a rare interview. He wasn't here to promote a film or defend his legacy. He was here to talk about the state of the world, modern masculinity, and the industry that had both made him and, in some ways, tried to leave him behind. Jessica saw this as an opportunity, a chance to make a statement, to turn Clint into a relic of the past, a cautionary tale of a man refusing to evolve. The audience knew it too. There was a current in the air, an electricity that buzzed with anticipation. Jessica had done this before, but this time, it was different. This time, she was going up against a man who had stared down Hollywood's biggest names, who had lived through decades of cultural shifts and never wavered. The cameras rolled, the red light blinked. It was time. Jessica's smile was warm, rehearsed, the kind that put guests at ease just long enough to lower their guard. "It's such an honor to have you here, Clint," she said, crossing her legs and tilting her head slightly, her signature move. The look that let audiences know she was already in control. Clint sat back in his chair, unbothered, relaxed, the very image of effortless confidence. He offered a small nod, his voice gravelly but calm. "Pleasure to be here." She started light, the surface-level pleasantries. "You've had such a legendary career, actor, director, producer. You've given us films that have shaped generations," she said. "Dirty Harry, Unforgiven, Gran Torino, truly some of the most iconic roles in cinema history." Clint simply nodded again, waiting. But she continued, and there it was, the shift. Jessica leaned forward slightly, her smile tightening, her voice taking on an almost playful edge, like a cat circling its prey. "Let's be honest, Clint, men like you are a dying breed." A ripple of chuckles moved through the audience. Some nodded, some whispered. They knew where this was going. Jessica's expression was controlled, self-assured. She was setting him up. And he knew it. She continued, her tone as smooth as silk but laced with challenge. "You've built your career playing tough. No-nonsense men. Men who don't apologize. Who take charge. Who, let's just say, don't always fit into the modern idea of masculinity." She paused, giving the audience a moment to digest, to lean in closer. "Do you think Hollywood has moved on from that?" she asked, arching a perfectly shaped brow. "Do you think it's time to leave those old ideas behind?" The audience chuckled again. They smelled blood in the water. But Clint Eastwood? He didn't flinch. Instead, he just smiled. The air tightened. The audience wasn't laughing anymore. Clint didn't blink, didn't shift, didn't so much as adjust his posture. He just sat there, calm, steady, unmoved. Then, slowly, deliberately, he leaned back, reached for his water, and took a slow, measured sip. The silence stretched. Jessica Lange watched him carefully, her confident smirk still in place. But the energy had shifted. Finally, Clint set the glass down, laced his fingers together, and spoke. So, because I believe in grit, discipline, and responsibility, that makes me outdated? His voice was low but firm. Each word weighted, landing like stones in the quiet studio. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Jessica's smirk flickered, just for a fraction of a second. This wasn't how this was supposed to go. He was supposed to laugh it off. Or maybe get defensive, stumble over his words. Something. But instead, he sat there, completely unfazed, waiting for her to explain why strength had suddenly become a flaw. Jessica quickly regrouped, adjusting her posture, keeping her confident demeanor intact. She chuckled softly, shaking her head as if Clint had just proven her point without realizing it. Jessica turned toward the audience, as if inviting them into the conversation. She smirked, her eyes gleaming with controlled amusement. "Come on, Clint," she said, tilting her head slightly. "You've spent your whole career playing gunslinging tough guys, men who solve problems with their fists. Their weapons, their brute force." The audience chuckled, nodding along. Jessica continued, her voice smooth, confident. "Don't you think we need a new kind of hero? One who doesn't rely on toxic masculinity to solve problems." A louder wave of laughter rolled through the crowd. They were waiting for Clint to falter, for him to scramble for a defense. To make himself the very example of the outdated ideals Jessica was challenging. That was her goal. She wanted the headline. She wanted Clint to sit there, nod solemnly, and admit that his kind of man, the rugged, old-school, unapologetic type, was no longer relevant. She wanted the viral moment. But Clint? Clint wasn't playing along. His expression didn't change. He let Jessica's words hang in the air, their weight dissipating before they could land. Then, after a long beat, he finally spoke, calm, steady, and razor-sharp. The tension crackled. The audience, once eager to laugh at Clint's expense, now sat in uncomfortable silence, eyes darting between him and Jessica. Clint didn't blink, didn't shift, didn't smile. Instead, he leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees. His gaze locked on Jessica, like a predator who had just turned the tables on its hunter. "Let me ask you something, sweetheart." The room held its breath. Clint's voice was calm, steady, but there was something behind it. Something firm, something real. "If a guy breaks into your house tonight, you want a poet or a protector?" The air in the studio tightened. The audience let out a collective gasp. A ripple of shock and admiration surged through them. A few people murmured. A couple clapped. Jessica froze. Just for a second. Just long enough for the cameras to catch the flicker of hesitation. But she was good at this. She forced a laugh, shaking her head like Clint had just said something charmingly old-fashioned. "That's a false equivalency, Clint." Her voice was controlled but a little less certain now. "Society doesn't work like an old Western anymore." She looked to the audience for reassurance. But the reaction was different now. People weren't laughing with her anymore. Some were shifting in their seats, thinking. Clint just smirked. He wasn't done. He didn't back down. He didn't break eye contact. Instead, he broke the illusion. His voice was low, even, unwavering. "You sit here, all done up in your fancy studio. Safe. Because tough people built this country and keep it running. Jessica's smile tightened. And you have the nerve to mock them? Silence. The audience shifted, some whispering, others nodding. Jessica flipped through her cue cards, eyes scanning for a new angle, a way to regain control. But there was no coming back from this. Clint wasn't playing defense anymore. He was leading the conversation now. And everyone in the room knew it. Jessica could feel the audience slipping away. The energy wasn't what she had expected. Clint wasn't flustered. He wasn't defensive. He was in control. She needed to take it back. So, she went for the personal attack. Jessica leaned back, crossed her legs, and gave a calculated smile, the kind she had used 100 times before to subtly undermine her guests. Look, Clint, she began, her tone light, playful, but dripping with condescension. I respect your career. Really, I do. But don't you think it's time to step aside? Maybe let the younger generation take the lead? The audience laughed nervously, some sensing the shift from debate to disrespect. Jessica smirked, feeling the momentum returning to her side. This was the move that always worked: make the guest look outdated, irrelevant, past their prime. But Clint just tilted his head slightly, a slow smirk creeping onto his face. He had seen this before, and he knew exactly how to handle it. He let the moment breathe. He didn't rush. He didn't react. Instead, he slowly nodded, as if considering Jessica's words. Then, in a voice steady, calm, but razor sharp, he spoke. Funny, I remember when people used to respect their elders instead of trying to replace them. The audience erupted. Jessica's smirk vanished. Before she could recover, Clint leaned forward slightly, his piercing gaze locked onto her. Wisdom doesn't expire, sweetheart. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle in. It just gets ignored by people who think they already know everything. Gasps, applause, whispers. The power dynamic had completely shifted. Jessica's mouth opened, as if searching for a quick comeback. But nothing came out. She was caught off guard, thrown completely off balance. The audience wasn't on her side anymore. The cameras caught everything, and the moment that would go viral had just happened. The interview wasn't even over before the internet had already decided who won. Inside the studio, Jessica Lange sat stone-faced, still reeling from Clint's final words. But outside, it was a wildfire. Someone in the live audience had already clipped the moment and uploaded it to Twitter. Within minutes, the video was exploding across social media. Trending #1. #Clint Clapback. Clint Eastwood School's talk show host in savage interview. Jessica Lange regrets trying to embarrass Clint Eastwood. 94-year-old legend destroys media narrative. The reactions flooded in. This is why old-school wisdom will always matter. Jessica tried, but Clint is built different. They keep underestimating these legends. And they keep losing. Notice how she had nothing to say when he hit her with the truth. YouTube commentators raced to break down the moment. Podcasters analyzed every word. Reaction channels replayed the exact second Jessica lost control. Even mainstream news couldn't ignore it. By morning, every major outlet was covering the exchange. Some praised. Clint Eastwood proves why real masculinity is timeless. You don't cancel a legend, you just remind people why they respect him. Others rushed to defend Jessica. An unfortunate moment for the host. She was unfairly targeted online. Jessica Lange bravely challenged outdated ideals but was met with toxic backlash. But the internet had already made up its mind. Jessica Lange was rattled. The very audience that once cheered for her was now turning against her, questioning whether she was really as sharp as she seemed. And Clint? He was nowhere to be found. No tweets, no statements, no victory lap, because he didn't need one. Inside Jessica's team headquarters, panic mode had set in. Emails flew back and forth. The PR department scrambled to control the damage, crafting a response that could shift the narrative back in Jessica's favor. Official statement. While we respect Mr. Eastwood's career and perspectives, it's important to have conversations that reflect progress and inclusion. We encourage open dialogue on evolving social values. Translation? They lost. And they knew it. They tried spinning the moment as problematic and outdated. But it didn't stick, because the conversation had already moved beyond them. The debate had shifted from just Jessica versus Clint to something bigger. Are we too quick to dismiss old school values? Is toughness really outdated, or is it still necessary? What happened to respecting wisdom and experience? Clint had walked into that studio expecting a normal interview. Instead, he sparked a cultural debate. And the best part? He never even needed to say another word. While networks, pundits, and social media warriors dissected every second of the exchange, Clint just went on with his life. A week later, a journalist caught up with him outside a cafe in Carmel, California. "Mr. Eastwood, do you have any response to the viral interview?" Clint adjusted his jacket, took a sip of his black coffee, and smirked. "Nope." And just like that, he walked away. Because real legends don't explain themselves. They don't argue. They don't need to win on the internet. They just stand their ground. And sometimes, that's all it takes to remind the world why strength, wisdom, and integrity will always matter. Want to hear more of this? Then click on the video on the right-hand side, which is even more insane.